You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. Wednesday brought pretty significant bombshell from the LSU football program as Brian Kelly fired 4 defensive assistants. And not quite as significant a day here on Thursday, but news nonetheless, and we would expect more and more of these with every passing day as the deadline for players to declare for the draft or announce their intention to return to school approaches. And the Tigers did get a decision and some good news on Thursday with safety Major Burns announcing via social media that he will return to LSU. Tweeting, after much thought and consideration, I will be returning to LSU this year. I'm looking forward to earning my degree and finishing what I started. So Major Burns returning to LSU for the 2024 season. There's a couple of different ways to look at this. First, to the cynic, you're not wrong. The LSU defense, namely the secondary, was atrocious in 2023. And there is a school of thought is to say, what in the world would you want any of those guys back for because they were all terrible? And you're not wrong. There is merit to that. And Major Burns was part of it. And he had one gigantic highlight of the season, which was the pick 6 at the end of the Missouri game, which sealed the win. But by and large, Major Burns has never been a great coverage safety. He's more of a box safety. He's a physical player who's willing to come up and make a tackle. He's had 156 tackles during his 3 years at LSU. And his time at LSU has probably been more so defined by 2 things. Number one, certainly injuries, which slowed his career at the beginning. Number 2, he is a world-class trash talker. There is nobody on this team that talks more than does Major Burns. And while I understand when you're not very good and there's guys trash talking, I also can at least respect the fact that somebody had enough give a damn, enough chutzpah to go get in somebody else's face. And that's Major Burns, for better or worse, on this team. The other, I said there's 2 ways to look at it. That's one, which is, why should you celebrate anybody returning from a defense so bad? The other part of the conversation is that I don't ever think it's a bad thing when you return a player that has played in 27 games with 23 starts at LSU, and back in 2020 played in 6 games during his freshman season at Georgia during the COVID year. So over the course of 4 seasons, Major Burns has played in 33 games. There is no substitute for experience. That guy's got a ton of it, and you're glad to have him back in 2024. Now, there's 2 real questions as well. One, how much can Major Burns improve with a new defensive coordinator and a new defensive backs coach? If you're asking Major Burns to go play free safety or strong safety and turn and run and cover, that's not going to go well. That's not what he does. But could he be a nickel that plays in the box and helps in run support? Yeah, I think that certainly is something Major Burns could do for you. And obviously he's got great leadership and experience and all that stuff. Number 2 is, can he stay healthy? As I mentioned, he was injured his freshman season at Georgia. He came to LSU back in 2021, played early, had the foot injury that cost him the rest of the season. He ended up only playing 5 games that year. A year ago in 2022, he ended up having the neck injury, which cost him the second half of that season. But this year, 2023, he played in all 13 games. He was able to stay healthy and played in every game for you. So can he stay healthy? How much can he improve? 2 big questions. But Major Burns returning is a good thing for LSU. And when you look at that safety room, I kind of look at it to say, okay, compare and contrast the safety room from 23 to 24 and how it looks, at least as of right now, where your starting safeties were Major Burns and Andre Sam. You lost Greg Brooks, unfortunately, to a terrible medical situation. You moved Sage Ryan to corner out of necessity, and you had some young guys that probably project as a safety, like Javen Toviano, who had to play corner out of necessity, and Ryan Yates battled an injury from camp, didn't get on the field till late. Kylan Jackson, and Ryan Yates played in every game, mostly special teams, but got in there at safety as well. So you got a lot of that, but you look at Major Burns, who's played in 33 career games, And you're bringing in Jordan Gilbert as well, who's played in 25 games. Played in 12 games his freshman season at A&M, played 11 games a year ago, started the first 2 games this year before an injury cost him the rest of his year. But that's a guy who's played in 25 games. So just if you're starting with Burns and Gilbert, you're starting with guys who played a ton of football. The other guy that's worth mentioning as well is Sage Ryan. Sage Ryan moved to corner this year, again, out of sort of necessity, but that's a guy who over his time in Baton Rouge has played 31 games. Do you move Sage Ryan back to safety? I guess my point is, well, I don't think I mentioned any potential All-Americans there with Burns, Gilbert, or Ryan. I did just mention guys that have played an awful lot of football. And if you coach them better than they got coached this year, you've got 3 really veteran players to build around there. And then you've got Javian Toviano, who last year in spring, they played at nickel, at dime, at strong, at free, at corner. They played him everywhere to see where he best fit. And he'll be able to fill some type of valuable role. You've got Ryan Yates, who came from a football factory in Dallas and was ready-made and ready to go and played for you this year in all 13 games. Kylan Jackson from Zachary, who, as we mentioned, had that injury in fall camp and took him a while to get healthy and get reacclimated. But by the end of the season, he was playing and ended up playing in 5 games for you, which included the bowl game. You bring in Austin Osbury via the portal, who can give you depth and maybe continue to develop and be a rotational piece. And then you got guys like Joel Rogers and Jordan Allen, who have been young veterans now. And then Deshaun McBride, who's one of the highest rated prospects in the class, who might come in and surprise everyone and win a job day one because he's that talented. I guess my point is when you look at it and you go Burns, Gilbert, Osbury, Toviano, Yates, Jackson, Ryan, McBride, Rogers, Allen, that's 10 safeties. 10 potential safeties, anyway. 10 safeties on this roster for 2024 as of now. Now, someone could always enter the portal, however it may go, but even if you're just looking at Burns, Gilbert, Osbury, Toviano, Ryan, let's say Yates, Jackson, those 7, you've got guys who have played a lot of football and can improve year to year that are going to almost undoubtedly make you better at safety than you were this year because, man, it would be so hard to be worse. But Major Burns returning with his 33 career games played will return for a 5th season of college football in 2024. And I don't think it's coincidental, by the way. I do not think it's coincidental that a decision like that came today, a day after Matt House was fired. A day after Robert Steeples and Kerry Cooks were fired. I'm going to be very curious to see, leading up to the 15th, which is the draft decision deadline, where players have to declare for the draft. I'm going to be very interested over these next 2 weeks to see what players make those decisions to stay or go. And we're certainly looking at the defensive line with guys like Mason Smith and Jacoby and Guillory. It certainly seems around the program like Jacoby and Guillory is poised to return. Again, it's never done until it is, but we'll see. That would be huge. Mason Smith is a guy that, I think we all just sort of assumed he was going pro, and he didn't have a great season. So can you convince him with a new defensive coordinator, a new defensive line coach, to come back to school and maybe try to make a push at having the season we all hoped and thought he could have and be a first-round pick? Potentially bet on yourself and make tens of millions of dollars as a result. And I'll throw it out there as well, but I don't know that Mekhi Wingo signed with an agent yet. But we all saw that video on the field of he and Matt House. And it's very clear that there was a disconnect there. Not only with Wingo, but with other players as well. Is it worth going to Mekhi Wingo and saying, hey, being transparent, here's what we're looking to do at DC. Here's what we're looking to do at defensive line coach. Come back, run it back, and help us help us improve next year. Now, I don't know if that matters. You could certainly float Mekhi Wingo a nice NIL deal, which could incentivize him. But when you look at his draft slot, I talked to an agent today that said the consensus around the league seems to be a 3rd, 4th round pick, so maybe a late day 2, early day 3 guy. If he does come back to school, what's his ceiling? A 2nd round pick? It's sort of that money is sort of negligible. So I don't know that Mekhi Wingo would stand to gain a lot through the NFL's eyes by coming back, just because he is going to have a lower ceiling because of his body type and his size. Unless he becomes Aaron Donald. But maybe that's a guy who wants to be a team guy and run it back and try to finish right one more year in Baton Rouge. It's at least worth a shot. See if you can get him to have a change of heart. with the deck sort of cleared now after Wednesday's announcement, I feel like there's this collective cloud that's been lifted, this sigh of relief being breathed by a lot of people associated with the program and on the defensive side of the ball and the roster, the staff, all of it. And people are able to have really transparent conversations now, and maybe some positivity on that side of the ball is starting to seep back in, at least the promise of a better tomorrow, which I don't think existed had you maintained the status quo. So Major Burns returning. We'll see if others follow suit. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.